Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio from Monday, November 22nd, 2021. President Joe Biden renominates Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell for another 4-year term and chooses Fed Board member Lael Brainerd for vice chair. We'll hear from the president and talk about his choices with a reporter at MarketWatch. White House says over 90% of the federal workforce is in compliance with the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The vaccination requirement by the end of today, federal workers need to show proof. State Department reacting to the International Olympic Committee's video call with a Chinese tennis star who has been out of sight for 3 weeks after accusing a senior Chinese party official of coercing her into having sex. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin reaffirming the U.S. commitment to the Middle East, a visit to UAE and Bahrain. And First Lady Jill Biden welcoming the arrival of the White House Christmas tree. And now to President Biden. Before he announced the Federal Reserve nominations, he took a minute to speak about what happened on Sunday in Waukesha, Wisconsin. An SUV ramming through a barricade, killing at least 5 people, injuring more than 40 at a Christmas parade, striking a high school band, a children and seniors dance group. At least 6 children remain in critical condition. Here's the president.
Well, we don't have all the facts and details yet. We know this morning that 5 families in Waukesha are facing fresh grief of a life without a loved one. At least 40 Americans are suffering from injuries, some of them in critical condition. And an entire community is struggling to cope with the horrific act of violence. Last night, the people of Waukesha were gathered to celebrate the start of a season of hope and togetherness and Thanksgiving. This morning, Jill and I and the entire Biden family, and I'm sure all of us, pray that that same spirit's going to embrace and lift up all the victims of this tragedy, bringing comfort to those recovering from the injuries, and wrapping the families of those who died in the support of their community. We're all grateful for the extraordinary work of the first responders, from law enforcement to the emergency room doctors, who are working around the clock to deal with the terrible consequences of what happened last night. My administration is monitoring the situation very closely.
That's President Biden today in the Eisenhower Executive Office building right next to the White House. The police chief of Waukesha, Wisconsin, Daniel Thompson, holding a news conference today identifying the suspect as 39-year-old Darrell Brooks, saying that he was behind the maroon SUV and was allegedly involved in a domestic disturbance just minutes prior to driving into the crowd. He fled the scene of the domestic violence incident just before the police arrived. And the police chief in Waukesha is saying that Brooks will be charged with 5 counts of intentional first-degree homicide, and there is no evidence that this was a terrorist incident. The Wisconsin governor, Tony Evers, ordering flags to be flown at half-staff today and on days when funerals for the victims take place. Now back to the president and the Federal Reserve nominations. Jerome Powell staying on as chair, Lael Brainerd for vice chair. New York Times writes, this ensures policy continuity at a moment of rapid inflation and vast economic uncertainty, but potentially angering progressive Democrats who had been agitating for a change in leadership. Again, here's the president.
It's the Fed's job to balance 2 key goals. The first is to achieve maximum employment, to get as many Americans working as possible. And the second is to keep inflation low and stable. To meet these goals is going to require patience, skill, and independence. That's why today I'm nominating Jerome Powell for a second term as chair of the Federal Reserve. And I'm nominating Lael Brainerd to take the position as vice chair of the Federal Reserve. When our country was hemorrhaging jobs last year and there was panic in our financial markets, Jay's steady and decisive leadership helped to stabilize markets and put our economy on track to a robust recovery. Jay is a believer in the benefits of what economists call maximum employment. That's an economy where companies have to compete to attract workers, instead of workers competing with each other for jobs, where American workers get steady wage increases after decades of stagnation, and where the benefits of economic growth are broadly shared by everyone in the country. not just concentrated for those at the top. Jay said it well last month, and I'm going to quote him. He said, and I quote, "An economy is healthier and stronger when as many people as possible are able to work. If entrenched inequities prevent some Americans from participating fully in our labor markets, not only will they be held back from opportunities, but the economy overall will not realize its potential. And those who have historically been left behind stand the best chance of prospering in a strong economy with plentiful job opportunities," end of quote. As chair, Jay undertook a landmark review to reinforce the Federal Reserve's mission toward delivering full employment. We're making strong progress toward that goal now, and I believe Jay is the right person to see us through and finish that effort, while also addressing the threat of inflation that it poses to our families and to our economy. Jay and I have had a chance to discuss his views on priorities for the Federal Reserve in the years ahead. He's made clear to me a top priority will be to accelerate the Fed's effort to address and mitigate the risk that climate change poses to our financial system and our economy.
President Biden today. Jerome Powell, first nominated to the Federal Reserve by former President Barack Obama in 2012, and then nominated as chair by former President Donald Trump. He was confirmed as chair in 2018 by a Senate vote of 84 to 13. By the way, one of the no votes was then Senator Kamala Harris, who's now vice president. Jerome Powell at today's event with the president, speaking right after him.
Today, the economy is expanding at its fastest pace in many years, carrying the promise of a return to maximum employment. Challenges and opportunities remain, as always. The unprecedented reopening of the economy, along with the continuing effects of the pandemic, led to supply and demand imbalances, bottlenecks, and a burst of inflation. We know that high inflation takes a toll on families, especially those less able to meet the higher costs of essentials, like food, housing, and transportation. We will use our tools both to support the economy and a strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched. Other key priorities include vigilantly guarding the resilience and stability of the financial system, addressing evolving risks from climate change and cyber attacks, and facilitating the modernization of the payment system while protecting consumers. I look forward very much to continuing to work closely with my colleague of the past 7 years, Lael Brainard, as the Fed confronts these and other issues. Lael brings formidable talent, a wealth of experience, and good judgment to our work.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell at today's program with the president and Lael Brainard. Jerome Powell renominated by the president for another 4-year term. Brainard first nominated to the Fed board in 2014 by former President Obama. White House says she was interviewed this year by President Biden for the chair position. If she's confirmed as vice chair, she'll be taking over for Richard Clarida, whose term ends at the end of January. Here's Lael Brainard.
I'm deeply honored that you're entrusting me with this responsibility at a critical time. I'm committed to putting working Americans at the center of my work at the Federal Reserve. This means getting inflation down at a time when people are focused on their jobs and how far their paychecks will go. It means supporting a growing economy that includes everyone. It means ensuring that financial markets are thriving and resilient, and the economy is sustainable for future generations. It means serving all Americans in every community across the country and ensuring the Federal Reserve reflects the diversity of the communities we serve. I was privileged to work with Chair Powell as we made every effort to protect workers, businesses, and families from the COVID financial shock with the support of Congress. And I look forward to working with him in the months and years ahead to build a durable recovery.
With more on the nominations of Jerome Powell and Lael Brainard, we're joined by Gregg Robb, senior reporter for MarketWatch. Thanks so much for doing this. What does this mean for monetary policy ahead?
Well, thanks for having me. I think it means people think that with this behind them, the Fed can get back to their tricky task they have. Inflation is at 30-year highs, and Fed policy is super easy coming out of the pandemic. And Powell has a lot of tough choices ahead.
What are some of those choices?
Well, they're going to have to see. Right now, the Fed is trying to go slow and see that if the high inflation comes down. But if we get a couple more ugly inflation readings, the Fed's going to have to start to accelerate their exit of the easy policy and try to get to a more neutral policy stance. Right now, they still have their foot on the gas. They want to take the foot off the gas. And it sounds easy, but they're worried about the financial markets and how the financial market's going to act. So it's a very kind of a delicate balance that we'll see. But, it's critical the next couple of reports on inflation.
These nominations will need Senate confirmation. What's been the reaction from senators?
I mean, it's always been known that Powell was a very popular person up on Capitol Hill. He's sort of made it one of his missions when he took over the Fed in 2018 to kind of repair the ties of the Fed and Congress that had kind of frayed under Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen. They, for no fault of their own, but they were more economists than politicians, and they could sometimes fumble the ball a little bit. Powell kind of went up there and he, made time for the congressmen and talked to them, and it came across. He has friends on both sides of the aisle, and they've come out today and said it. So it seems like smoother sailing, and one of the reasons why President Biden picked him.
You write that while President Biden did not take this opportunity to restructure the Federal Reserve, he will have some more nominations and choices ahead to do so. What are those?
There are 7 members of the Fed Board of Governors in Washington, and Biden is going to have a chance to fill 4 of them. And so that'll give him a majority of Biden picks, and that'll be by next year with all the vacancies. And so there are also 12 regional Fed presidents out around the country, and the president doesn't have much to do with them. But when they decide on interest rates, the Board of Governors in Washington has tremendous sway. They get all 7 votes, and there's only 5 regional bank presidents. So it'll be the Biden Fed at some point next year.
We're talking with Robb from MarketWatch. Lael Brainerd was the choice of many progressive Democrats. Had she been picked, how might the policy have changed?
I just want to step back a little bit. I'm not a buyer of that argument that Brainerd was the choice of progressives. I think we don't know. The President Biden and his team have kept this nomination and really quiet. There wasn't a lot of leaks, and people have been pounding on them since Labor Day. So some of the narratives that have come out on this is on Brainerd is I'm still a little bit puzzled about, and there's still work to be done here. I think more that Brainerd maybe was backed by maybe the Obama team and then the Clinton team, but she has ties to those teams. But Brainerd has been a solid Democrat, and I think she would have been. It was thought she would lean on solidly Democratic ideas like making sure people had jobs and, maybe not being so worried about inflation, I think, and also paying more attention to climate change. That was sort of like the knee-jerk kind of thought about her. But I do think that it had a big impact because the markets had kind of got this sense that maybe, because Biden dragged his feet on Powell, and the markets got a sense, although they didn't want to say it out loud, that maybe that Brainerd was going to get the job. And so there was some kind of relief today because there always is this testing period when you put a new Fed chairman in, and people sort of didn't want to go through that. And it looks that way.
Robb is a senior reporter for MarketWatch. Follow him on Twitter at GRobb2000 and his stories at marketwatch.com. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
U.S. Senate not in session this holiday week, but some tweets from the leaders of the Senate Banking Committee. Democrat Sherrod Brown is the chair. He tweets, Fed Chair Powell has led our economy through a historic pandemic. Under his and President Biden's leadership, unemployment has fallen and workers are gaining power. They'll continue to steer our recovery in the right direction toward an economy that empowers workers and their families. And this tweet from the ranking Republican on the Senate Banking Committee, Pat Toomey. Chairman Powell's recent comments give me confidence that he recognizes the risks of higher and more persistent inflation and is willing to act accordingly to control it. I look forward to supporting his confirmation. But Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, putting out a statement saying it's no secret I oppose Chair Jerome Powell's renomination and I will vote against him. I will support the president's nomination of Lael Brainerd as vice chair. Warren, in her statement, citing what she calls Powell's failures on regulation, climate, and ethics. Wall Street today, Dow up 17, NASDAQ down 202, S&P down 15. Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, speaking today as host Axios describes it, on how the public and private sectors are expanding access to capital and services for those who've been excluded from the financial system. The term often used to describe these people are unbanked.
The percentage of South Carolinians who are unbanked is around 16, 17%. That means nearly 1 out of every 5 South Carolinians do not have a good relationship or any relationship with a financial institution. That means that they're using cash to transact their business. That A, could be dangerous, and B, means that they're not able to avail themselves to the entire portfolio that might be available at their financial institution. So we want to find ways to encourage that credit invisible or those who are unbanked to become a part of the system so that they and their kids get to benefit from the excellent opportunities that are afforded to people who have that relationship. And we saw that, frankly, Mike, during the pandemic, that having a relationship with your financial institution, especially as small businesses, was really important to getting your PPP loan approved and then forgiven in record time.
And Senator, I think there's a lot of people, including maybe some of our guests today, who don't realize that there are Americans who are basically excluded from the global financial system. But that's something that you're very familiar with.
I've lived that reality of being outside of the financial systems for probably half of my life almost. The older I get, the harder it is to say that, of course. But I will say this, that for millions of Americans around our country who need more help, need more resources, need more access to loans and opportunities, it is imperative upon us in the positions that we hold to make it easier for those who are credit worthy to get the credit they need. You think about home ownership and the disparities between the races. One of the ways that we bridge that gap is not by extending loans to people who cannot afford it, but helping those who can be a part of the system and helping those who have been repaying their rent on time and their electric bill on time and their cell phone on time. That information should be scored by the credit agencies, the credit scoring agencies. And when that happens, you have more people who have the beauty of experiencing the American dream, building equity in their largest asset, their homes, and closing the wealth gap. That erases a lot of the ills of society in and of itself. And so we're going to continue to work hard on that topic.
Senator Tim Scott, a conversation today with Mike Allen, co-founder and executive editor of Axios. Reuters reporting this morning, the White House confirmed Monday that more than 90% of 3.5 million federal employees covered by a presidential COVID-19 vaccine mandate have received at least one vaccine dose ahead of a Monday deadline. In total, the administration has deemed 95% of federal workers comply with its requirement in that they either have been vaccinated, are completing vaccinations, or have a pending religious or medical exemption request, the White House said. Late Monday afternoon, confirmation from the White House COVID-19 response team, coordinator Jeffrey Zients.
Ahead of tonight's deadline, the federal government has achieved 95% compliance, and 90% of the 3.5 million federal workers are already vaccinated. So we are successfully implementing vaccination requirements for the largest workforce in the United States, with federal employees in every part of the nation and around the world. For example, we have 98% compliance at the IRS, with nearly 25% of IRS employees getting vaccinated after the president announced the requirement. At the FBI, 99% compliance. And we're well set up for the holiday travel season with nearly 98% compliance at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, 93% at TSA, and 99% at the FAA. To be clear, the goal of vaccination requirements is to protect workers, not to punish them. So tonight's deadline is not an endpoint or a cliff. We continue to see more and more federal employees getting their shots. And for the small percentage of employees who have not yet complied, agencies are beginning the education and counseling process. Looking at the federal workforce vaccination data makes one thing obvious. Vaccination requirements work. They encourage more people to get vaccinated. Vaccination requirements are good for workers and the economy. They protect our communities and country, and they will accelerate our path out of the pandemic.
Jeffrey Zients is the White House COVID-19 response coordinator. Today's virtual briefing, which you can find it in its entirety at our website, cspan.org. The members of the team, including Dr. Rochelle Walensky, CDC Director, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, Chief Science Advisor at the White House, also encouraging everyone to get a booster shot now that the vaccine boosters for COVID-19 for all 3 approved vaccines now allowed as of Friday. The indoor mask mandate in Washington, D.C., one of the strictest in the country, ending today after 16 weeks in effect. The decision by Mayor Muriel Bowser applauded by many businesses, especially those involving tourism and physical fitness. But 10 Washington, D.C. council members writing the mayor a letter in opposition, saying we're concerned that changing course in the winter months, not to mention the week before a major travel holiday, is not a prudent course of action. It sends a signal that public health concerns are back to normal when they are not. Mayor Bowser asked about this by a reporter today.
We're seeing, I guess, the council members made their comment today. New York Times said basically nationwide they're gearing up for a increase in infections because of the holiday season. Any thoughts there?
Well, Sam, let me just be clear about where we are. Just like we've dialed back and dialed up interventions related to COVID over the last 20 months, that's exactly what we're doing now. And in some places in the District of Columbia, there's no mask mandate imposed by the government, but there are likely mask requirements imposed by private businesses. People in their homes will have mask mandates or mask requirements for their guests, and so on and so on. And that's exactly where we are today. So we are updating. DC Health will continue to provide surveillance metrics on DC Health's web pages at coronavirus.dc.gov. And there will be recommendations, so not mandates, but recommendations related to mask. And those recommendations will rely on a person's vaccination status and the level of community spread. And then people should make decisions based on that. We're also, while dialing back this government-wide universal mask mandate, we are replacing it with recommendations, as we've always had, about layered mitigation strategies. So depending on one's vaccination status and the level of community spread, you should be making decisions about whether you want to have indoor or outdoor activities, or go to indoor or outdoor activities, whether you need to practice social distancing, 6-foot distancing, whether or how you will wear your mask and always have your mask with you, and pay attention to a property owner's or a vehicle owner's or a host requirements for masks. So masks continue to be required by the government in schools. They continue to be required on our transportation services, at airports, on buses, on the metro, in our rideshare vehicles, in our congregate settings. So for all of our homes where our elderly residents live, they're required. Our healthcare facilities, hospitals, doctors' offices, all required. Our congregate settings that we run, like our correctional facilities and the shelter. So all of those things are required.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, with reporters today. Dr. Anthony Fauci, with the White House COVID-19 response team, asked today about the end of the Washington, D.C. indoor mask mandate. He was interviewed by National Public Radio's Steve Inskeep.
here in Washington, D.C., which is about as democratic a city as there is. So this would not be political in the way that we've seen. Washington, D.C. is dropping its mask mandate in many public places. City Council objects. The mayor says, I'm going ahead. Is that wise?
Well, again, it adds an extra degree of risk. You really have to balance things. You have to understand, and we totally understand how people feel. But if you look at the dynamics of the virus in the community now, this past week, the average daily case was over 90,000. The hospitalizations are up 29%. The deaths, thank goodness, are down, but they are usually a lagging indicator. The cases, again, and the hospitalizations are both up. Cases up 29%, hospitals up 6%. When you have a dynamic like that, Steve, you really got to be careful. Masks are not going to be forever, for sure. The more people that get vaccinated, the more people that get boosted, the lower the level of infection in the community will be. And then you start thinking about pulling back on masks. But you don't want to do it prematurely. As much as you'd like to do it, you've got to be careful.
Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, its director on NPR today. He does say that Americans do not need to wear masks during family gatherings this Thanksgiving, as long as everyone there is fully vaccinated. Washington Today continues in a minute.
Well, learn about the latest nonfiction books and best-selling authors on C-SPAN's newest podcast about books. In each episode, we'll report on bestsellers, we'll look at book reviews from around the country, you'll hear from authors talking about their latest books, you'll also hear insider interviews with nonfiction book publishing industry experts. On this week's episode, you'll get the chance to meet the owner of Source Booksellers in Detroit, Janet Webster Jones. She provides insight about selling books during the COVID pandemic and what it's been like for independent booksellers over the last 18 months. Find and follow About Books wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now app and wherever you get your podcasts. U.S. State Department reacting to the International Olympic Committee president holding a video call on Sunday with Peng Shuai, a three-time Olympian tennis player from China. Shuai had not been seen for 3 weeks since accusing a former high-ranking Chinese Communist Party official of coercing her into having sex at his home a couple of years ago. Here's the reporter's question to Ned Price, U.S. State Department spokesman.
What do you make of the disappearance of Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai? Do you have any concerns for U.S. athletes as they head over there to the Olympics? Do you think now is the time to call for a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics or any other sort of boycott?
Well, there have been a number of statements that have been made on Peng Shuai. I just saw a recent statement from the Women's Tennis Association. Of course, all of us, the State Department included, we are closely monitoring the situation surrounding Peng Shuai. We share the concern that has been expressed around the world, as we all want her, of course, to be safe. I'm not in a position to offer updates from here, but rest assured we are closely following her and the situation more broadly. As a general matter, as a broader matter, we'll continue to support the ability of individuals to report sexual assault and to seek accountability. And we believe that any report anywhere in the world should be investigated. We will continue in the PRC context and in all contexts to stand up for the freedom of speech, especially in light of what we've seen from the PRC, and that is essentially a zero-tolerance approach for criticism and a record of silencing or attempting to silence those who do attempt to speak out.
State Department spokesman Ned Price. Another issue at today's State Department briefing reports that 2 of 17 members of a U.S.-based missionary group kidnapped by a gang in Haiti in October have been released. The gang had been demanding $17 million in ransom. Again, here is Ned Price.
2 Americans who were released by the kidnappers, and any update on your efforts to free the other Americans?
Well, this is something that since last month, mid-last month, when these reports first emerged, that, as you know, the U.S. government and the State Department in particular has been deeply engaged in. We are in regular contact with the missionary group. We're in regular contact with Haitian counterparts at the highest levels, both at the political level and also within the Haitian National Police. We've been working closely with our Canadian counterparts as well, given that one of the hostages has Canadian citizenship. You have likely seen the reports that 2 of the individuals who were previously held have been released out of concern for their privacy. We're not going to offer further comments, but this is something that we are and remain deeply engaged in to try and see a successful resolution.
State Department spokesman Ned Price. The church organization that these hostages are affiliated with, Christian Aid Ministries, based in Ohio, says the 2 hostages that have been freed are in good spirits and being cared for. The group's Haitian driver also abducted, according to a local human rights organization. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin finishing up a trip to Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. Wall Street Journal reporting that he sought to reassure allies that Washington remains committed to Middle East security after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan aggravated worries that it was abandoning the region. And this article goes on. Addressing a security forum Saturday in Bahrain, the Pentagon chief said the U.S. maintains tens of thousands of troops in the region and would move in more if needed, but didn't indicate any imminent force deployments amid a string of recent attacks by Iran-linked groups in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Well, stop today was at an air base in UAE where U.S. troops are stationed.
If you don't remember anything that I say today, I want you to remember 2 things. The first thing is that your presence here makes an incredible difference. You know, I've spent the last couple of days engaging senior leaders in the region here to remind them that the United States of America is committed to our partners and allies in the region. And, you know, we have a presence here. We have tens of thousands of troops, you know, throughout the region. There's a notion that we're gonna leave this region altogether at some point in time, but you know that's not true. We have interest here. We're going to pay attention to those interests, and I can say that forever. But what really makes a difference is ambassadors like yourself here, working with our partners, building capacity, and really standing shoulder to shoulder with them to kind of demonstrate our commitment. So your presence is awfully important. The other thing I would say to you is I want you to convey to your families on behalf of Lloyd Austin that we are grateful for their sacrifices as well. We're coming up on a holiday period. My guess is that some of you have missed a number of holidays since you've been in the military. And you need to know that we're grateful for your sacrifices. Your families need to know that we're grateful for their sacrifices. And hopefully the next Thanksgiving, you'll be able to spend at the dinner table with them.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin speaking to the U.S. troops at an air base in United Arab Emirates. This is Washington Today. New York Post has a story. Michael Cohen was released from home confinement restrictions Monday morning as he vowed to continue to hand over information about dirty deeds he said outside of Manhattan federal court. Former President Donald Trump's ex-personal attorney was released from federal prison on furlough in May 2020 after serving more than a year of a 3-year sentence for tax evasion, bank fraud, and lying to Congress. He was placed on home confinement after being cut loose from Otisville Correctional Facility as part of an effort to slow the spread of COVID-19 behind bars. That was from the New York Post. And here is Michael Cohen outside the courtroom in New York City.
I have just a brief statement that I'd like to make. First, all too often, we hear the adage, we are a country of laws without justice. My release today in no way negates the actions that I took at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. But it also does not negate the behavior of the Justice Department, Bill Barr, the Southern District of New York prosecutors, Judge William H. Pauley III, or Donald himself. in my initial incarceration and prosecution. It also does not excuse the latter, unconstitutional action of remanding me back to Otisville due to my refusal to waive my First Amendment constitutional right to publish my memoir, Disloyal. Nevertheless, I remain cognizant of my responsibilities and my release today. And today I will not cease my commitment to law enforcement. I will continue to provide information, testimony, documents, and my full cooperation on all ongoing investigations to ensure that others are held responsible for their dirty deeds and that no one is ever believed to be above the law. And I thank you all for coming.
What's next for you?
Not 100% sure yet.
How do you feel?
I feel great today. It's been long overdue. I mean, 13 and a half months in Otisville, 18 months in home confinement. It's not easy any way that you slice it. Though I am extremely happy that I'm home with my wife and my children.
Michael, what do you actually have to do here today?
It's a lot of paper signing, a lot of documents, discussions with probation in terms of how things proceed for the next. I received 3 years of supervised release. I'm still waiting for, of course, under the First Step Act, I'm waiting for Merrick Garland to ensure that Michael Carvajal, the head of the Bureau of Prisons, institutes what all federal inmates are entitled to, and that is earned time credit based upon their work productivity as well as their educational programming. And again, I thank you all.
Was there an electronic bracelet you had to take on?
No.
Michael Cohen, former self-described fixer for Donald Trump in New York City after being released from home confinement restrictions. Both the Manhattan District Attorney and the New York Attorney General's office continuing investigations based on Cohen's allegations and testimony before Congress that the Trump Organization misstated the value of real estate to fraudulently lower tax liability and get more favorable loan and insurance terms. Former President Donald Trump has not said whether he plans to run for president again in 2024. A political action committee affiliated with him emailing an ad today to supporters and potential donors, equating President Biden with former President Jimmy Carter, especially on the economy.
Decades after Jimmy Carter, Joe Biden picked up where he left off. With America surrendering to terrorists, Biden's foolish spending is causing inflation, which means more pain at the pump, higher prices on groceries, devaluing your retirement savings when you need it most. Once was a mistake. Twice is a disaster. America needs strong leaders, not weak ones. Save America JFC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Newsmax writing about that ad as these final words are heard. Biden is seen stumbling while walking up the stairs to Air Force One, and Trump is seen with his hand over his heart and then applauding supporters. C-SPAN is launching a new podcast today, Presidential Recordings. It features conversations with the at least 6 presidents who recorded conversations while in office. Today is also the anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Here is Lyndon Johnson, November 22nd, 1963, after President Kennedy was killed and he became president, calling from Air Force One to John Kennedy's mother, Rose Kennedy, at the White House.
AF1 from Crown, Mrs. Kennedy on. Go ahead, please. Hello, Mrs. Kennedy. Hello, Mrs. Kennedy. We're talking from the airplane. Can you hear us all right? Over.
Thank you. Hello.
Yes, Mrs. Kennedy. I have Mr. Johnson for you here. Ms. Kennedy?
Yes. Yes, Mr. President. Yes.
I wish to God there was something that I could do, and I wanted to tell you that we were grieving with you.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know you love Jack and he loves you.
Rose Kennedy, 58 years ago, talking with Lyndon Johnson. Crown, the code name for the White House. This after President Kennedy was shot and killed in Dallas. 3 days later, Lyndon Johnson speaking by phone about the assassination with civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.
A good many people told me that they heard about your statement, I guess on TV, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right.
I've been locked up in this office and I haven't seen it, but I won't tell you how grateful I am and how worthy I'm going to try to be of all your hopes.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so happy to hear that, and I knew that you had just that great spirit, and you know you have our support and backing
Well, we know what a difficult period this is. It's just an impossible period. We got a budget coming up that's got nothing to do with it. It's practically already made, and we got a civil rights bill that hadn't even passed the House, and it's November, and Hubert Humphrey told me yesterday everybody wanted to go home. We got a tax bill that they haven't touched, and we just got to not let up on any of them and keep going, and I guess they'll say that I'm repudiated, but I'm going to ask the Congress Wednesday to just stay there, let pass them all. They won't do it, but we'll just keep them there next year till they do, and we just won't give up an inch. Well, this is mighty fine. I think it's so imperative. I think one of the great tributes that we can pay in memory of President Kennedy is to try to enact some of the great progressive policies that he sought to initiate. Well, I'm going to support them all, and you can count on that, and I'm going to do my best to get other men to do likewise, and I'll have to have y'all's help. I never needed more than I do now. Well, you know you have it, and just feel free to call on us for anything. Thank you so much, Mark.
Martin Luther King Jr. and President Lyndon Johnson, November 25th, 1963. President Johnson was president at that point, for just a few days after the assassination of President Kennedy. And you heard just a sampling of the types of conversations that you can get on C-SPAN's new podcast, Presidential Recordings. Find it on the C-SPAN Now app and wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe so you don't miss any. Sounds of the holiday season in the White House driveway, a horse-drawn cart delivering the official White House Christmas tree, an 18.5-foot Fraser fir, which will be decorated and placed in the White House Blue Room. The theme this year, not yet announced. The tree comes from Peak Farms, Jefferson, North Carolina, which won this year's contest from the National Christmas Tree Association to provide the White House Christmas tree. There to receive it, First Lady Jill Biden.
Happy holidays. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'll see you next week when we do the Christmas reveal.
What's your message to the armed forces celebrating the holidays?
Be safe. Have a happy, healthy holiday. Thank you.
How was the birthday celebration?
Hey, thanks for coming.
First Lady Jill Biden and the White House driveway receiving the official Christmas tree that will be placed inside the White House. She and President Biden heading to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to celebrate an early Thanksgiving with service members and military families. The National Christmas Tree on the Ellipse, south of the White House, will be lit in the annual Pageant of Peace on December 2nd. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. And for more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word, at c-span.org/connect. Hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day, we're taking your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Tuesday morning, a discussion on President Biden's economic agenda and next year's midterm elections with Naveen Nayak, president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Then Kevin Kuhlman, vice president of the National Federation of Independent Business, on the impact of Biden administration policies on small businesses. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.